Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our second evening of faculty talks of the week, second and final evening of faculty talks of this week. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who haven't been here yet, my name is Dustin Ross. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the summer program manager here at the Fine Arts Work Center. And we have a great lineup for you tonight. We're going to hear from writer Garrard Conley and poet Santee Frazier, who will both read from their work. And then we will see a presentation from photographer David Hilliard. And then we'll invite them all back up to the stage for a Q&A with all of you. Before we begin, a bit of housekeeping and other items of interest. Tomorrow afternoon, 1:30, I encourage you to meet out here for a walk through Provincetown with Mark Adams, where he'll share his vast knowledge about the natural and cultural history of Provincetown and the Outer Cape. That's not to be missed. It's a really, really interesting and fun conversation. Again, tomorrow night, Thursday night, is student night. If you haven't done so already, please sign up. The student sign-up sheet is over in the student lounge. After our conversation, Garrard and Santee will be signing books in the back. Other books by other members of this year's faculty are also for sale in our bookstore and at the back of the room, as well as some very pretty folk merchandise. The gallery, the Hudson D. Walker Gallery, will be open after our conversation tonight. If you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to do so. It's an amazing summer exhibition called To Move a Mountain that is curated by past Falk Fellow Cody Brown and features work by former Falk Fellows. Be sure and check that out. We want to give a shout out to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation, who support all of our summer programming. The restrooms are still located right down that hallway. We have assisted listening devices at the back of the room for anybody who may need them. Hannah or Miracle can help you with those. And finally, please do us all a favor and turn your cell phones to silent. Now, I'd like to kick things off by inviting one of Garrard's students, Michael Sadowski, to the stage to introduce Garrard Conley.
I'm Michael Sadowski. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the honor and privilege of introducing our first reader, Garrard Conley. I didn't know Garrard before this week, but I certainly knew his work. His searing yet beautifully rendered New York Times bestselling memoir, UnErased, about his experience with ex-gay conversion therapy, touched the part of me that had once been the gay kid everybody wanted to change, more deeply than anything I'd ever read. So the minute I heard he'd published a novel, I was out at my local bookstore to buy it. I tore through All the World Beside faster than anything I've read in recent memory. On one level, it's a historical novel about forbidden love between two men in colonial New England, but its human truths resonate across time and space. And it's a heck of a page-turner. The man knows how to tell a story. So when I saw he was doing a workshop here, I had to come, my first time ever at Falk. In addition to his books, Garrard's writing has appeared in the New York Times, Oxford American, Time, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and a host of other publications. He's the creator and co-producer of the podcast UnErased, The History of Conversion Therapy in America, and his work as an activist has literally saved lives, leading to the outlawing of conversion therapy in many parts of the United States. Garrard is a graduate of Brooklyn College's MFA program, where he was a Truman Capote Fellow specializing in fiction. His bio says he's an assistant professor of creative writing at Kennesaw State University, but I believe he just got tenure, which would make him associate professor. And I can absolutely see why. In addition to his accomplishments as a writer, Garrard is a skilled and giving teacher. I found his workshop this week to be purposeful, rigorous, amazingly well organized, and, not for nothing, fun. He calls it Get Inspired, and it has certainly done that for me. I came into this week with 2 unsold novels and said on the first day of our workshop that I was in a bit of a why bother place with my writing. In 3 short days, Garrard has changed that, and I am back at the page with new energy thanks to his brilliantly crafted prompts and his kind and wise guidance. Here to read from his newest work of fiction, please welcome the deeply talented writer and teacher, Garrard Conley.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I've forgotten what I'm going to say now. So I'm always thrilled to be here, and thank you to my students who are always so inspiring. I mean, it's just, y'all know, right? It's a special place, and the writing quality is bizarrely good here. You know, don't tell anybody, but it's better than Bennington and Kennesaw State, where I teach. Wish I could get tenure here. So thank you to Sharon, David, Dustin, Chandra, Miracle, Naya, and so many others who make this place possible. My fellow presenters who are so wonderful, Santee and David. It's really an honor to be here and to witness your work. So this is a new chapter. It's a chapter from a new novel. I haven't even sent it out yet. In the process of finding a new agent and an editor that will take something that's this strange, so we'll see. It's that mid-career shift that everyone told me about and warned me about. And this is, all you need to know really is it's the first chapter. It's about a televangelist sort of gone wrong. Feels like my wheelhouse, so here we are. Thank you. It's an honor to read this with you. Mary Was Better Than Jesus is the name of the chapter title. Long before the Good News Network became more than a twinkle in Hank Campbell's eye, before talk of satellites or Bible theme parks or megachurches with broadcasts on every continent save Antarctica, there had been only the two of them with no place to go besides elsewhere and no real plan for their lives aside from marriage. The way Beulah Campbell spoke of her husband, Hank was either the dumbest, sweetest man she'd ever met or the sharpest, shrewdest shark of a businessman to ever walk the earth. The stories she spun out of their decades-long marriage alternated depending on her moods, as did all of her stories. If someone from the chorus of interviewers swarming her public life were to pin her down on a wobbly fact, and they hardly ever dared it, Beulah would simply shrug and say, well, there's two sides to every story. Her audience didn't much care what she said as long as she said it with 2 parts sass and 1 part unwavering faith, stirred with a hint of self-deprecation to offset her gaudy looks. The truth, however, was much more complicated. When Beulah searched her heart on the matter, what she found beneath those old stories was a stinking heap of shame. She hadn't been a real believer back then, or no, it wasn't that she hadn't believed in God, it was that she had treated him like an unwanted stepbrother. She felt she needed to get around God to get ahead in life. Secure in the invincibility of her youth, she supposed that once she found the life of her dreams, husband, house, car, infinite wardrobe, she could finally invite that lost stepbrother into some distant wing of her roomy mansion. Hank Campbell was a sober man. He never touched a drink once because his Church of Christ parents taught him not to, never touched Beulah once until she asked politely one night while sitting in his powder blue Chevy convertible with the top down and the stars conspiring above their tilted heads. A good year after they'd begun dating, she, a shrewd if naive 15-year-old, and he, 25 and God-fearing and awkward with no real friends. Though she knew there should be passion involved at some point, that the girl was supposed to fend off the boy's advances, she had been perfectly fine with no heavy petting until she began to worry there might never be any at all. In the moments before she took matters into her own hands, she weighed the pros and cons of fornication with Hank. He was only a mechanic in his father's shop, con, but he was going places, pro. For one, this car of his, this baby he had crafted lovingly with his own hands, was all anyone could talk about, pro. When Beulah rode beside him with the top down, she was a brunette back then, with long curls and lightly freckled cheeks she hadn't yet bothered to conceal with foundation. She was a real queen, pro. He was excessively kind to her friends, especially the more awkward ones who had yet to outgrow puberty, pro. Though he did tend to go on far too long with the compliments, con. He was handsome, pro. And being a handsome man in America could get you far if you stayed away from dope and hard liquor, which, again, he was vehemently, if a tad too vehemently, set against, con. She did the simple math, but in the end, what decided it was the memory of the boys she'd known before him, how cloying they were, how they made her head hurt with their childishness, how their hard-ons pinned her like a dead butterfly to the middle of the high school gymnasium. His car had been her first taste of fame. She was intoxicated by the attention and couldn't live another second of her life without it. At such a young age, she couldn't have known she was giving it all up for a car, not a man. That when she said, "What about it, Hank?" and reached for the top button of his trousers, she had been speaking to the car itself, or what the car represented, an ease of movement and the promise of endless summer days, which was, after all, some part of Hank, wasn't it? He would take her apart and put her back together, good as new. When she returned to life as a married woman, she'd no longer be subjected to her mother's vortex of infinite depression. At this rate, anyway, he wasn't going to propose to her anytime soon if she didn't make him. 1965, a summer night in Elwyn, Tennessee, the car, the stars. He was handsome, did she mention that? Paul Newman, piercing blue eyes handsome, hands larger than her head handsome, barrel chest she could lay her head upon and listen to the secret workings of the heart handsome. They fumbled around that first night, and though he was shy at first, she admired his body, the way his nervous breathing moved through every part of him. As she ran her hands over his skin, she let her mind wander to the house with its spotless floors, and somehow, even then, a conspicuous lack of children. "Do you want kids, Hank?" she said, resting her head on his ample shoulder. "Sure I do," he said, "but not like this." "Like what, then?" She waited for the proposal, but none came. It was clear Hank would require something more drastic. For weeks, she sought the nerve to go through with her plan. She sat beside her mother's bitterness in the front row of Calvary Baptist and thought of all those old biddies staring holes in her back while she grew scarlet, turned whore, teased her hair to a tower with Aquanet, because that's what you do when you're a whore. Might as well give them a show like Debbie Hannon with her mile-high hair, who got herself knocked up at 14 and had the nerve to name her 30-year-old cousin Dude, who hadn't been seen in years. Would she have to become friends with someone who picked her nose during potluck and refused to eat anything besides mac and cheese out of a box, which she then defiled with ketchup? Beulah had to consider the possibility, because if her plan went to shit and Hank didn't do right by her, that's where she'd be, sitting at the kids' table with Debbie. She told exactly one girlfriend about messing around with Hank, someone she knew liked to gossip, and that was all it took. Pretty soon everyone knew Beulah was a liability, the wrong kind of girl, no matter how much they liked her. But that was the way it played out in places like Elwyn, Tennessee. Girls trapped by rumors, corralled down the aisle to take a ring and a kiss from a man they'd barely touched. Beulah chose all this for herself, sure, but it was one thing to plan it all out in order to trap a man, another to endure those mean-hearted stares. "You want to get out of here, don't you, Hank?" "I want whatever you want, but not like this." "Like what, then?" She waited for the proposal. None came. The only thing Beulah hadn't planned for was Hank's astonishing guilt. In the role he was meant to play, he was the guilty party, sure. He had ruined a sweet young girl of 15 who would have to be sensible and get a marriage license as soon as possible so they could staunch the rumors and both of their families could finally breathe again. But Beulah hadn't expected him to take it all so seriously. Didn't he know this was just a game everyone played for the sake of tradition? She was so close to starting her new life, yet here he was asking after her soul, asking if they were literally going to burn in hell for all eternity over a premature ejaculation. Over the next few weeks, he would hardly look her in the eye. He blushed like a schoolgirl. For the first time in his life, he developed a stutter. She worried she had already lost everything in a gamble on the wrong guy. When she confronted him about his foolishness, Hank pretended not to listen. They were standing in the middle of her high school hallway after the final bell. She hadn't come outside to join him in his car, and he'd come inside to look for her. "You don't want me," she said. She was furious. Crazy she hadn't seen how his parents had warped him into a freak. He said nothing. He looked at those useless feet of his, which were taking her nowhere. "Well," Beulah said, "I guess that's it then. Forget about calling the house." "We've sinned, Beulah. We've got to make it right." After Hank said those horribly earnest words in the hallway for all her classmates to hear, she laughed. She couldn't help it. Despite the fact that many people's parents had gone about things in exactly the same way as the two of them were now, Hank believed that all of this was real. Boys really were stupider, as her mother liked to say. The saying must have come from experience. When had Beulah's father ever done anything on his own besides leave? Even so, she felt bad for laughing when she saw what it did to his face. Seeing those handsome features melt into a quivering frown was all it took to make her love him. "It's going to be all right, Hank," Beulah said, drawing close enough to fit against him. "I don't know." "I'm a Baptist," Beulah tried, thinking back to the few sermons she hadn't slept through. "You can be one too. Satan may tempt us from time to time, but once we're saved, we're always saved. Jesus promised us heaven in exchange for our salvation. All we have to do is submit to him." Hank looked down at her with relief. She almost felt sorry for how much he trusted her. "I'm not sure I can change religions," he said. "It's a different denomination, Hank. Same religion." "That's not how my parents see it. In our church, they say you can lose your salvation. We wouldn't have done what we did if we were saved, would we?" "Of course we would," Beulah said, smoothing the cowlick at the back of his head. "We all make mistakes. That's why Jesus shed his blood on the cross for us. That doesn't mean we won't sin again. It means we're human and flawed, but we put our faith in him anyway." "Do I need to get baptized?" "Eventually," Beulah said, guessing. She had a vague memory of being baptized at the age of 9, though she wasn't really sure why she'd done it. That's how you seal the deal once you're ready. And that was that. Hank's great rebellion went from being one kind of hard ass to another. Only the Baptists at least enjoyed a little gospel music every now and then. Those of you who grew up Church of Christ get that joke. She never said any of this to his face, of course. Hank and jokes just don't mix. Laughter, she soon learned, would have to come from outside the marriage. I'll say this before I continue with this last part. Trigger warning for animal harm. I am sorry, but it's part of the story, and it actually happened, so here we go. The Campbells were a sullen bunch. They were upstanding and came from good stock, but they were Puritans through and through. You couldn't exactly hate them any more than you could hate the forefathers of this fine country, but you wouldn't want to be caught dead dining with somebody like John Winthrop either. On the few occasions when Beulah had been invited to dine at their ranch in the months before the marriage, she had been seated opposite the old grandma whose face was permanently frozen in a painful-looking grimace. Nobody spoke, and Beulah tried not to stare. The scraping of forks, the old people making weird mouth sounds. She wanted to fly out the window like the witch they already thought she was. At the end of the meal, after the patriarch read aloud from his family Bible some passage Beulah has since forgotten, but back then knew was meant to criticize her and her alone, she saw the grandma's face relax in the mirror above the mantel, and she thought how mysterious people truly were. The face brought up something from her childhood. The Campbells, but she hadn't known their names back then. They had been the ones to offer up their chains for the public execution that made Elwyn famous, put it on the map for families on the way to Florida who wanted to take a pee break in a town so backward it sold keychains in the shape of nooses. Elwyn, if you don't know it already, shared a circus with neighboring Bridgeport called the Globe-Trotting Spectacle of Marvels. The circus's main claim to fame had been an elephant named Mary, a 5-ton Asian beauty who had been hauled across the world to provide cheap entertainment to bored families who couldn't stand one more quiet night on the farm. Well, you might be disgusted by all this, but Beulah, at 5 years old, couldn't see anything but Mary's majestic height and those mournful brown eyes set within rippling skin like a rare fragment of amber. She remembered Mary from her visits to the circus, that immense gentleness, that aura of peace washing over the crowd as she entered the ring. To be that big, that solid. Mary seemed invincible, and to a child's eye she was also a star, weighted on hand and foot by her trainers. Beulah didn't learn of Mary's real situation until that chilly day when her parents took her to the circus by a different route, leading her through the muddy Elwyn train yard. They passed the roundhouse and the giant derrick, the smell of rust and oil making her nauseous, and then they were being handed tickets even though the circus was still far away. Beulah didn't understand. Her parents haggled over the price, paying much more than usual, and suddenly they were already at a show, an outdoor show. There was Mary standing tall above the heads of the largest crowd Elwyn had ever seen, only Mary didn't look like herself. Mary was limping, she was in pain, and her eyes had lost their spark. Beulah asked her parents what kind of show this was, but they shushed her and told her Mary had done something terrible, that they had to see justice brought to the creature. Beulah watched as trainer after trainer prodded Mary, as one man who would later become the town's Episcopal minister took a shotgun to her head. But Mary wouldn't die. The barker thought it best to explain the situation to the newcomers, and that was when Beulah learned that Mary had killed her trainer, a man by the name of Eldridge. He had poked at her, innocently, the barker told them, reminded them again and again over the course of his speech. Eldridge had been an innocent and kind Christian man who wanted nothing but Mary's happiness, and now it had been decided by the town council that this animal should die before she became a threat to others. Beulah buried her head in her mother's coat, but she couldn't look away from Mary for long, from the terrible spectacle that disgusted and excited her. There was talk of electrocution. Maybe someone rigged something up at some point, she can't remember, but finally the crowd voted to hang Mary from the neck at the derrick. They tried it with chains, Mary looking eerily calm as they hoisted her higher and higher, and for a while everyone thought it would do the trick. But the chains broke, and Mary plummeted to the ground, her legs buckling beneath her, and yes, there, right there, that was when Beulah first saw the Campbell face, that sharp Puritan face belonging to the grandmother, whose features were disturbed even then. Hank's father standing beside her, offering up an extra set of chains it seemed he'd brought especially for the occasion. This time the chains didn't break. Mary struggled as they lifted her up, but when she returned to the earth, she was no longer Mary. When Beulah looked away and caught a glimpse of the Campbell family once more, she saw the old woman smiling, her face restored to its natural state, almost beautiful again. Beulah never forgot it, and when she stared into that old woman's eyes in the Campbell living room, when she saw how the terror-stricken face relaxed for a moment as it listened to those Old Testament judgments, she wanted nothing more than to slap the woman silly. "I've met your family before," Beulah said as Hank walked her back to the car. "Funny, I remembered when I saw your grandmother's face." "We don't like to mention her face," Hank said. "I believe in talking about things openly, don't you, Hank?" "Sure." Hank opened the passenger door for her. "What kind of people are they, Hank?" "What's gotten into you? What do you mean, what kind of people?" Beulah took a deep breath. She released it in his face with a wry laugh. "You're always laughing." Hank slouched beside the door, his head drooping. He wanted her inside the car, where he could charm her into Perry Como submission with his chrome dials. She wasn't about to take another step until they fixed this, though it wasn't really about the elephant. It was beginning to dawn on her that despite all her planning for this marriage, there would still be people like the Campbells who'd never claim her as one of their own. If they got married the way the Campbells wanted it, with their endless rules and judgments hanging over them, the two of them living somewhere on the ranch, they'd be trapped forever, and she'd be back inside that vortex where the bitterness would finally swallow her whole. What she had to do was get Hank on her side, convince him this town was too rotten to bear, that they needed to get married somewhere else. "They killed an innocent creature," she said, "hung her from the neck." It took Hank a minute to catch up. He shook his head. "That's what this is about? An elephant?" "It's sick," Beulah said. "I saw it." "I saw it too." "They killed an innocent creature and charged ticket prices for it," Beulah said. "What kind of people do that? This is a sick place, and everyone here is sick." "She killed a man, Beulah, the man who looked after her. She might have killed others too." "Is that what your father says?" "He didn't do anything." "Neither did Pontius Pilate." It was Hank's turn to laugh. "Now you're being silly talking about Jesus. She was an animal." "Mary was better than Jesus," Beulah said. Hank's startled innocence, his pained face, then the sudden and chilling anger in his eyes, which really could be the eyes of a murderer. "Maybe we're too different, Hank," she said, her voice eerily calm. A minute passed, another. Despite the breeze, the air was stuffy, the oppressive humidity here to stay. "Too different," Hank said quietly. He was shaking, and for the first time she saw that it was from rage and felt suddenly afraid. She had been playing a game this whole time with a man who didn't play games. She wanted to stop this fight before things got out of hand, but it was already out of hand. "You told everyone, didn't you," Hank said, "that we'd messed around. You told everyone, so I'd be trapped. You couldn't wait to be a Campbell, but now that you're here in my house after my parents cooked and cleaned for you, you're telling me you're calling it off because of some stupid elephant? Well, I sure dodged a bullet. What kind of people are we? What kind of people are you? You can walk home is what I'm saying. You can walk home and stay there. He jerked her away from the car. Her head spun. Her arm and shoulder burned so hot that she could taste the pain waiting for her once it cooled. He wouldn't go through with it. He couldn't. Not out in the street in front of his parents' house. But she saw him close the passenger side door. She saw him turn the key. She saw him drive off. She had to believe it, even if she knew it wasn't real. Hugging her coat to her, massaging her shoulder, she marched back up to the house and knocked. When his mother opened the door, Beulah said, "Hank's gone." For a moment, it seemed the woman might say, "Good." But instead, she ushered Beulah inside and brought her over to the fire, beside the old woman whose face had once again settled into terror. Beulah sat in silence for over an hour. At last, the mother took the chair across from her and said, "He'll never be a Baptist." Beulah knew better than to respond, but the woman wasn't finished. "No matter what you do to him," she said, "he's still ours. Just you remember that, hussy." Beulah wanted to scream. She had never been spoken to like that, but she was deeply mired in this mess of her own making. She had to play it smart. Hank was right. She had trapped them both because she hadn't known what else to do. But what had he done? Now they were in it together, bound to be married, no matter how many drag-out fights in the street for all the world to see, because that was how things went in a place like Elwyn, Tennessee, this place of blood and sacrifice and divine retribution. Beulah said none of this to her hundreds of interviewers over the years. Instead, what she said was, "We were wild back then. I was in love. What can I say? We were fools, but we were lucky fools." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Garrett, giving us a glimpse into your brand new work. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Okay, so next up, I would like to invite one of Santee's students, Owen Oliver, to the stage to introduce Santee Frazier.
Flachayam Owenika Yachol. Hello everyone, my name is Owen Oliver. I am fortunate to be a workshop participant in Santee's Indigenous Poetics class. I've admired Santee's work for a while, not only his poems and his stories, but his work as a community member. This last May, I graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts with an MFA in creative writing. I was drawn to this program because I was able to produce art that relates to my people without having to be bogged down with how non-native audiences were going to interpret it. In the program, Native artists and mentors had their lasting impacts for building a space for the next generation. One of these people is Santee. Santee served as the director of the Institute of American Indian Arts MFA program a couple years before I entered the program. I can say without hesitation that without his commitment to community and his love for literature and art, I wouldn't be the same artist standing up here. So coming to FOC and learning from Santee has been so amazing and something I will never forget. Santee Frazier, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, holds a BFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts and an MFA from Syracuse University. His most recent collection of poetry, Aurum, was published in 2019 by the University of Arizona Press. Frazier has received numerous honors, including the Lannan Foundation Residency Fellowship, the School for Advanced Research Indigenous Writer in Residence, Native Arts and Culture Foundation Literature Fellowship, and a 2024 Amant Siena Studio and Research Residency Fellowship. He currently serves as the Viebranz Professor of Creative Writing at St. Lawrence University. Welcome, Santee.
introduction, I think the work of a director is often invisible work, and it's been really nice to to converse with you throughout the week, knowing that you don't know if your work is wasted or what impact that it has, and I really appreciate that affirmation. And I wanted to thank everyone here. This is my first time here, and I really think that I feel comfortable and I feel like I belong because all of the work that we do together as a collective, right? It's not just, of course, Chandra does a lot of work, right? But her infectious sort of attitude and openness, right, reaches all of us in a certain way, right? And I feel like, that the sense of wanting to belong, right, and welcoming others, right, that reverberates in culture. And this week I felt like, my workshop, we have a really calm, really close vibe this week. And, again, it's not just any one person that does that. We all do that, right? We all contribute to the community, right? We all take care of it. We all are accountable to it for the time that we're here. And so I'm going to read some poems from my second book. And then there's just a couple of things to know. And that the book itself, Aurum, was, the imagining of it was, I was trying to imagine a world with no indigenous culture, which is ultimately the end goal of colonial sort of methodologies, right? That eventually all the indigenous people here will become, right, like everyone else. And so I tried to imagine a world that way, and I wrote poems from that perspective. And then there's another thing that through this work, right, I slowly strip away narrative convention from the poems. And so when I move into strictly image, right, I'm trying to remove like a sense of storytelling from the images themselves so that you can experience them sort of on your own terms. And so, and then at the end, I'll put everything back together. I'll put the narrative elements back in. So I timed this earlier. I don't want to talk too long. One time I talked 10 minutes, half my time for a 20-minute reading. I don't want to do that. So you might see me doing this. I'm not trying to be fancy. It just helps me not get tongue-tied, and you'll see why. So I'm just going to read straight through. Not that my work merits this, but if you could hold your applause and snaps, it's a meditative sort of thing. So, but you can do like and nod and stuff like that. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Ore body. The shine off the street reflects the coming bustle of dawn, of plastic and bolted steel, neon and industry caught in the asphalt. And as the grass sweats, the groan of machinery echoing off masonry, the dust rises, sowing itself into the fat of trees, shining the faces of men in the ditch under hard hats, shoveling dirt, whose language rolls the tongue of digging. The clank and song of membris, a music in the busting rock and soil. This ritual of sunrise, of shovel, and the gearing mechanisms of progress reminds me of a man in unlaced high tops finger painting a wall, smearing gold into brick. His face shined like gunmetal, and when he sucked the gold from the paper bag, I knew his ritual had something to do with time travel, with brick, before mineral, polygon, the invention of wheel, story of flat, firing of clay, and now making my way through the city whose streets are named by numbers and minerals, the sunlight breaking the haze of dust and exhaust, I realize the oldest thing in this city is thirst. So in the context of writing this, I tried to write a poem about heritage, and I tried to write a poem about my mother and daughter at the same time. It's called Load. In the mirror, I see how your mouth made vowels when you sang into a mug of lager. Always in the misted window light, a gush in the throat, some memory under your wrinkled brow. Not eggs in the grease, not flame under skillet, but glowered lips gripping the strike. Minnows shine in the divots of your forehead, sunup shading craggy punched sheetrock. My cheeks scraping the balding linoleum, crumbs of bacon and black pepper under the rust-speckled stove. Not the stereo blaring the trailer tin, no poor man's dollar hollered to the pounding of biscuit dough, the rain shaking window, just a wild grimace in the dark. In the evenings watching your hair bounce until all I could see was the dark, and the swallows of flat beer numb me to sleep. And looking at our faces, I realized that this isn't much, that all I have to offer is the sound of road in the inner ear. In thinking of those days, I imagine melting your records in the slow embers of the wood stove fire, watching them burn to black smoke. But this isn't about anger. It's about our faces, my daughter's too, as we stand here in the mirror, chest to chest, me holding her, twitching and stiff as she brails my lips. The black of her pupil, a marble burnished with womb, not yet etched with dollar. It's about your head wrapped in gauze, face stitched, nose to cheekbone. So this next poem takes up the second half of my of Aurum, and it was written over the course of about 5 years, taking the Amtrak from Chicago to Santa Fe, traveling back and forth to the Institute of American Indian Arts. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the antiphon says, and this version of the tale you took to slaughter with tawny chests fortified by the thin Andean air. In your grip, a lighter, thumb and flint sparking to flame, blankets ablaze, the muted fire of fabric. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the psalm says. In the version of the tale, you learn squalor by sharpening your skull to selenum, by flaying skin with a fluted blade. They leap a puddle, dome-bellied, sticky with pop, plumb dark feet and ankles. Cranium crammed through the windshield, T-bird bottomed out, in a ditch, dash still lit, a school of cans scattered across the seat. Television static, silhouette, his head bobbing like an oil derrick, hair a wiry frizz, projected on the sheetrock. You see morning sun yellow and splintered wood paneling, brass hands of a clock blistering like rust, pinto beans, salt meat melted into the juice, cornbread, mustard yellowing the mash, can-shaped meat, sliced, fried in bacon grease. Through almond-shaped mask holes, pulsating lips wet with snoring, shirt off, jeans unbuttoned, work boot for pillow, gashed knuckles, burned scar shaped like a three-pronged fork on the round of his shoulder, cheeks cratered, nose shiny, fungal. School of cans, ashtray spired orange, it is Halloween, the trailer house lit dim blue, outside, leaves scatter, applause. Through almond-shaped mask holes, you see a dim-lit bathroom, small hexagon tiles, black and white, patterned to shape a walkway, the stalls boxed and beamed wood. And on your tippy toes, neck outstretched, you see projected on the mirror, scribbled on a paper plate, crosshatch of a screech owl's face tied to your head with fishing twine. With your finger, find where crayon meets paper, eye holes cut jagged with a razor blade. On your knees, swiveling on a stool, Scan your face in the neck of a whiskey bottle, glowing in the amber. It is Easter, your kin clacking billiards, gulping down pickled eggs and beer. You stand at a pinball machine, mashing the flippers, the deep ding of steel, the ball slicking its way across the plastic, a carnival in a box, like the sound of bees popping in a paper bag. Projected on the back glass, your face and dollies lit up like gospel, hoot and stomp, echo in the tavern, the juke bright against the cinder blot, the forget it blinking in pink neon. Iron glowing in the dim, the trailer house skewered by smoke pipe, walls smeared by greased up hands, sink overflowing with crusty pans. Your ear to the floor, you hear cars shadowing a scene on curtains, chrome and glass shaking the trailer tin. Ear to the floor, one eye in the crack of a door, you see a curling iron, empty pack of cools, bits of crumb and toenail, hardened pools of wax, red as lovemaking, the smell of mucus and salt. You hear the factory, jutting and jogging, cans of corn niblets down a snaking ring of bearings. Pickup trucks, bucking wing nuts, carburetors, distributor caps, or dislodged earth. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the textbook says. In this version of the tale, you ate the glacier. Horses did not survive the bridge. You are the slide on the wall, model of the human skeleton. The radio whispers a piano that vibrates gospel when it utters, simmering corn filling the house with a nutty perfume. What sounds but guzzle of a pumped well, the gushing water against the metal? This is slowness, scything of grass, chucking grain toward chickens, low bark of hounds, gnats backlit by the sun, their flight pattern scattered in gold. Song of exoskeleton, zoom of the June bug's wings, lifting itself from the screen door off into the damp night. Far away roar of tire, bucking junk in the truck bed. Slow sputter and buzz of a mower echoed in the gully. The wood stove in the dark, its bulbous hole a womb of popping embers. The grain makes everything smell fried. Trains all night, stopping at the silos. This is industry. This is sleep. It's the crust in your eyes as you sing to the dew-slick dandelions. It is a bowl of beans smashed with mustard. You are peeling a scab from your elbow, jeans holing at the knee. The bus bobs your head against the glass, your face dissolving against the diesels convoying out of town. Limbo your head into the desk, hear their vowels echoing off the carbon steel. This is the afterworld, the hoisting of feed sacks into the truck bed, sawing of ribs in the slaughterhouse, snuff spit in the coffee can. This is where you will be, jeans holing at the knee. This is not fate, the textbook says. In this version of the tale, you are to be crucified or burned. Rotors twisted wood to shreds. You stare at the tip of a pencil, light a mirror on sharpened lead. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the textbook says. Your village was razed, grunts smothered, children left to twirl legless in the scorched corn. So I'll just read a couple of new poems. that kind of were written in COVID, so they're very lonely and bleak. I apologize. Not that I need to, and we all know how difficult that was. Harmonium. A white light spalls through the drab, curtains beige and stiff. Outside, limbs, ground, aglow. A lean of snow carved by a dim wind. Tires hiss the wet asphalt. In pining for the slow hum of gears, a rumble in the cavern of ear, low-hung limbs vein distance, pump jacks gnaw at dirt, a dreary run of hours, the brush bending, dustless. Light and sound shaping the blackness. Sometimes distance is a malady fraught with undazzling clank as to skim slick misty bark or hum a tune of rot. I envy dreams that cleave well-bred spells of woe that vector ache and rifle the banal into dusks ornamented with kindling as to argufy small oblivions cold and speared by ochreish glint. And one more new one, then I'll finish up. The unmagical, the undazzled. The street lamp shadow uncoils the milkiest of dreams, the eyes wet and cloud in the sockets. A shallow sleep when the world blurs in the lashes, when the weight of lids slit and shut. At last to wake is to smother. The deliverance is the blackness spoken in the hollowing elm, on the cusp of the most silent end when the bark no longer flurries into the firelit dusk, like children coiling themselves to fetus, as if the spine could shield them from knuckles, or the stammering tongue could deafen their pummeling. This is the theater where the gawkers take marrow, claim the radius of contusion, so far into oblivion, so far into boredom, in the starless dark, adorning ourselves in shrapnel. I realized when I was watching things unfold in Gaza how I felt guilty about not necessarily enjoyment, but the way that I was interacting with the violence, and I felt like that poem sort of tries to address that in some way. That harm is not my own, right? And in watching it, I have to have some sense of ethics in my thoughts, right, of how I receive those images. So I'm going to end with the poem Sun Perch, which is the last narrative poem that I wrote. It's been a long time since I wrote it, too. And again, this is about my son, so I tried to write about a poem about myself and my son at the same time. Both of the kids were like, well, when are you going to write a poem about me, right? And then also, when I wrote this poem, which kind of came during a fellowship, my daughter was like, okay, so when are you going to write a poem about me? And it became like this sort of, and so those things made it into the book, but then also they argue about which poem's better, too. I let you be the judge of that. If I don't know, maybe they're the same. I try to use the same sort of turns. Sun Perch. It is late, but outside the night is glowing with snow and streetlight. Quiet, but for the growl and skid of the plows. Winter, Syracuse, where the fainting snow fusses and scatters until it collapses roofs and power lines. And now, sitting in that gauzy light, nothing but the sounds of sleep, my son's cub-like snore, I'm reminded my childhood was spent in another city, alone, a boy who knew nothing of evenings, only by the gradual blackening behind buildings. Jar bugs pinging electric poles, from the street curb hearing the clink of dishes, chuckles of supper. I remember a fish staring blankly at me from the center of a round plate rimmed with almond-eyed bluebirds, wings extended, mid-flap. The fish, perhaps lightly steamed, then wok-fried, charred along the belly, fins crisped, mouth open from its last breath, fossilized in a reduction of fish sauce and honey. Next to the plate, a bowl of steamed rice. I sat at the table waiting, not knowing how to eat the fish or rice with chopsticks, smiling as best I could while in Vietnamese, John explained that I lived 3 blocks away and that I'd been home alone for days. His father looked at me as he left the kitchen wearing the shirt of a machinist, Paul sewn in above the right pocket. Later, I would learn he worked 3 jobs, and on his only day off, Sunday, after Mass, he would drive his family to some faraway lake outside of the city where they would reel in sun perch and net them boatside. The smells of cooking oil and aromatics fading, John translated for his mother, who asked me to sleep over. And I said, no thank you, smiled, and walked home to whatever misfortune awaited in that dark house where the plumbing was empty, my bed a pallet of blankets on the living room floor. I said no, not out of shame, but because I wanted to lie down and remember how I'd used my fingers to scrape flesh off bones, skin tearing with it, and how I trembled when asked to eat the eyes, fins, and tail. And I remember now how in the throes of labor my wife looked at me, how she gripped my hand when the pain ruptured up, and how through it all, behind the brown webbing of her pupils, there was gentleness. When our son finally came, he could not breathe. He was blue, motionless. I remember the midwife rushing him off, and minutes later, hearing a gasping bawl. I didn't know what I saw as my son shivered, hands gnarled, locked in cry, still blind from birth, breathing underneath a plastic dome. When I think of it now, the drive to that faraway lake, my first catch flopping in the hull of the boat, and later jerking the hook from its mouth, the perch must have been stunned at the sudden uselessness of its gills. As I watched it gasp against the hull of the boat, I wished what all boys wished for, a way of remembering how air rushes from your body after being socked in the gut, how to sit in the dark, alone, when street light is enough for a boy to make shapes with his hands, a play made of light, light made of snow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. And a reminder, Santee's work and Garrett's work are both available at the bookstore. And I also want to say that our next presenter, David Hilliard, has a beautiful photography book back there as well, also available. So with that, I would like to invite one of David's students, Diane Lederman, to the stage to introduce David.
Hello. When I was told I had 3 minutes to introduce David Hilliard, my first thought was, uh-oh, how could I possibly contain my effusiveness in 3 minutes? David is a wizard with his photographs and is the maestro of this class. His work has been displayed, and I'm going to just do a short bio because you have it on the website here, that his work has been displayed at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, among many other places. He teaches at Harvard University, Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and Lesley University. And among his accolades, he's been honored with a Fulbright and a Guggenheim Fellowship. His art is amazing. I can't walk down a cereal aisle without thinking about the photo in his work, What Could Be, or the haunting pictures of he and his father, the matching tattoos, and he and his father in the lake. Now for class. I have taken his workshop many times, and I can say he is a walking who's who of photography, a reverse Siri who will offer you the name of an artist before you can even say, hey Siri, who makes photographs about hands? Oh, sorry. He offers the reference service. Go away. He offers the reference service to everyone in the class. It's an amazing improvement of our work. As a teacher, David is a magician in other ways. His ability to create family out of the disparate characters we are in his classes make us better artists and people, and that lingers over time like a sweet gardenia. He is kind but critical in a way that helps the work, and we trust him and his insights. He stirs us off to offer that same eye in our work. I hadn't been able to make or take photographs in over a year, and I felt a little nervous about getting back with the camera. And when I saw that David was teaching, and I was just here 2 weeks ago for a writing class, I knew I had to return, even though it didn't make a lot of sense. But I said to my little wife-a-la, trying to explain this decision, I need David, and so do you.
Wow. Diane, thank you so much. That was really beautiful. And thank you, Siri. Thank you, everyone. Garrett and Santee. I have to say this. I say this every year, and I've been coming here since 2005, almost every summer. I follow because the visual artists always follow the writers, right? Not because it used to, it gets dark, but it's not going to happen today. But my tongue feels like a cinder block, after and I'm going to let go of that. But it's really great to be here. I only have 20 minutes. I also am going to set a timer. Whether or not I obey it, no, I will. So the nature of my workshop, and I want to thank my students that are here. Some of them are getting the light that I've ordered them to photograph because they record this also. What was I going to say? Oh, the workshop that I'm teaching is, the premise of it basically is like the deep dive into our histories of artists. So motifs and motives that run through our, themes that run through our work, stories that we tell habitually as visual art makers, the materials that we use to form those pictures, and motifs and things that appear within them. So it's like deconstructing every part of our art making. So I couldn't really just look at one project. So what I'm going to attempt to do is, it's here. I'm going to attempt to show you various bodies of work. And there will be times that I'll be talking, and there'll be times where I'm just going to try to be silent. I'm going to try. And I want to thank Miracle. Is Miracle here? Miracle, you are one. Thank you so much, because we had trouble with getting my slideshow on here, and so you were really helpful, and I'm hoping this works. Okay. Can we shut off these? Is it possible to put less light on the screen? Maybe not. I don't know if that helps or not. No, that's fine. I'm good. Thank you. So I'm going to show you a few bodies of work. Some are stories that are what I call once upon a time stories, meaning that they had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they wrap up. Others are ongoing examination, ongoing things that I photograph. So some end, some don't. But these are some of my parts to a certain extent. So this is a body of work, like Diane mentioned, about my father. Long story short is that my background's in theater initially, so there's a theatrical edge to my work. The world as a stage, if you will. There's a tableau, performative element to the work. And then I was also, for a brief time, I was a filmmaker, so there's a cinematic kind of thing going on in the work. But ultimately, it all coalesces into photographs. So what you have are still photographs pretending to be cinematic, meaning multiple moments that join together horizontally and vertically, and a little bit of performance, but the stories are based on my real life. They are culled from real life, but with a little bit of zhuzh. So that's it. So this body of work started when I was very young, a kid, and I grew up around photography. And so photographing my father, who my parents divorced when I was very young. My dad was a factory worker, kind of a free spirit, an atheist, outspoken about church and state, and so as left-leaning as you can be. And my mother, they divorced, so my mother is an evangelical, born-again Christian living in Florida. We'll get to her. And that's a body of work as well. So these are early work. This was work I made in graduate school. So this is early work. I made great work that I really loved in college and in grad school. So this is called The Lone Wolf. It's my father, who's reading Playboy magazine. And then I have details of the pictures as well. So that's the upper panel. And these are each one, so the individual photographs that hang next to each other with space in between them. So that's the first issue of Playboy, and in the foreground is the, like, you know, but down below is the more current one. And so it's, you know, and it's about class. I grew up lower middle class, Lowell, Massachusetts, first in my family to go to college. But my dad was my champion. He really let me be who I was, you know, nebulous gender, little bit of an outcast, like just, but he let me do whatever I wanted to do, and, you know, really kind of shepherded me, but let me have my own voice. So these are details of him. And I'm looking at Renaissance painting and theater, and he was a big fan of the transcendentalists, so there's a lot of references to like Walden and nature, and like that was his higher power. But he never went to college. He never like really got to achieve, but he was brilliant. And so I'd be in graduate school, I'm going home. I went to Yale University for grad school, and I'd be driving from New Haven to Boston, I mean to Lowell where he lived, and with a laundry list of pictures that I wanted to make. I had these ideas, and I would get them, I'd get there and he'd be like complaining about cereal, like he can't find the cereal that he wants. And I thought, well, I'm gonna make a picture of him finding the cereal. And so it's called His Problem with Plurality. So he's, and really, and I'm just also making more product myself, so I'm part of the problem. So until I get to the panel of him, I'm just creating more product, more commodity. So it's like a 30-foot long photograph. So it literally becomes an aisle that you shop in the gallery in a different way than you do at the Stop and Shop. It's so bad. I'm sorry you can't see this one, but this is just called Dad. It's one of when he was starting to age, he was isolated. He was a very private man. He kept a lot of secrets. And so this is just, you know, looking at the house kind of wrapping around him. But panel by panel, you can't really see this very well, but it's an aging building with resting tools, a portrait of him. So you have a still life in one panel, a portrait in another panel, and then like a landscape. So it's genres kind of mixing together. And Diane referenced this photograph as well, rock bottom, that's the two of us. But really the same thing, thinking about like you know, I am hardwired to become this man genetically and in other ways, and but we're also worlds apart in a lot of ways. And so these are the things that I'm thinking about. I'm not saying these, so my stories are in the pictures. I use a lot of titling to kind of suggest, so this is called Rock Bottom. It's a rocky lake in Maine where I have a place. And he loved to model. He was, again, he really loved, he was a ham. That's me. And he was in the Navy. I got the same tattoos, and my grandfather had them, and so they're not like hipster tattoos. Oh my God, this picture, you can't even see it. I'm sorry, but it is a dark photograph. He's napping. That's a dog. That little dot you can kind of see is a dog's eye. Oh my God. Okay, so a little break there. So now I'm in Florida, body of work ongoing about my mother's world. Everything's at right angles. Every house is the same. It's like, in, you know, it's a very different relationship with her. So she's there. Oh, so sorry, this clicker is weird. I'm sorry, guys, this clicker is. So that's the whole photograph. It's called Widow. She lost her second husband, my stepfather. And so I often go down to Florida to kind of make sense of her life. So I made this in response to the one I showed earlier of my father. So they're both in their old little boxes on other sides of the country. And then the family. So this is, you know, my great aunt Bertha. So it's also about Florida, retirement communities. She should not be driving. I love this picture, I do. This is called Mary Remembering. It's my grandmother in the middle. She had a dementia, and just listening to Mary repeat herself all day.
So these are American stories. They're universal stories. Everyone in this room has maybe a version of some of what I'm saying. So I think about my own work, but I also think about audience. This is Doting on Jane. I have to very quickly tell this story. I wanted to make like an aerobics exercise that they do. That does happen. I know it's a stereotype. But I got there and Jane wasn't feeling well. I forget what they said, but you could smell the whiskey on her breath. So she had a bender the night before. So although it seems like a fun picture, like the women, her friends, and one being my mother, are they're not pleased. And I'm using a 4x5 camera, so I'm using a big camera. It's very static. It's on a tripod, under a cloth. So I'm shooting analog. It goes digital after that, after I scan the film. This is Jesus in the guest room, so this is at the foot of my bed when I wake up. So this is at dawn. So it's a holographic Jesus. And then this is Jesus 2 feet to the right. So it turns into the Shroud of Turin as you move across it. So this is at dusk. This is When Lips and Skin Remember. It's kind of from a Cavafy poem that I like. So it's my mother remarried husband number 3 after her second husband passed. And he's a little rough. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of him. He had very different political views. He was not really good with women and race, and so I won't go on, but he was everything I don't like in a man, in a human. But this was their own personal Eden, right? In there waiting for the rapture. But good sports, right? Like mom would soap herself up, if It involved shopping later, it didn't come for free. So, you know the story. It's like a Seinfeld, it's a lot of fighting about parking. Bud lost his vision in one eye, still driving. My mother was a hoarder. This is the Walmart, so I'm thinking about the cereal aisle picture of my father's. This is my mother's thing. It's every flower in bloom at the same time at Walmart. And I made a version with my mother in the middle, and I didn't like it. I was trying to make the dad version and it was a little matchy-matchy. It wasn't happening. And then she stepped out of the frame, and that light came down the aisle, and I was like, man, that's the rapture. That's what she's waiting for. It's at Walmart. Who knew? But it moves from close-up focus. The focus is always changing, so it kind of moves as I make picture after picture. So it is, for me, like a movie camera in a lot of ways. They're epic photographs about nothing, some of them. And then they're aging. And so that, be careful what you sign on for, guys. You make a picture about your aging parents, and they age, and they pass, and it gets ugly. So you can't really see, but Bud's feet are swollen. My mother's starting to have memory issues. And there's alcoholism throughout my family, 100%. So they're drunk. And she's gone. It just really, it would stop being fun going there. I mean, it was never fun, but the camera, making pictures became a chore in a different way. This is one of the last pictures I made of her at home. So she went into assisted living with Bud. That's her third husband. Bud passed away 8 days after that. So my mother is there now, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with her. And she weighs less than 90 pounds. Nuances of maleness. I won't talk that much about these photographs, but a lot of my work, especially the book that's up on the table, deals with nuances of maleness, masculinity, the man I am, the man I desire, the men that I don't. It's so the men in my family. the gender balance, like there's a lot of men in my pictures. I don't know how to say it any other way. Sorry. But a lot, and desire. So there's the family work, but then there's the camera as about beauty and desire and longing. In one of the books not this book, but another book, I was interviewed by a man called Vince Aletti. He's also a music critic. And he was talking about this photograph. He said, this man never would have looked at you like this were it not for the camera. Which, it's true, right? You don't think about it, but it's like, he's not looking at me. He's projecting his hotness onto whatever. But it's like, but the camera gives me that ability to be that person for a minute. So there's, when I'm behind that camera, there's a lot of things. It's my voice, right? It's my critical voice. It's my voice of desire and questioning and complaining. And it's my strongest voice as a person. So I'm going to just move through pictures. I am really sorry that they're so dark. So this is called Fixing Jody. He's a painter. So that's different versions of him. My niece and her baby daddy. Trying to figure it out. Why not get a pit bull while you're at it? Just felt right. Strangers. Surrogate for me. That boy is me. I didn't want to be fishing. I wanted to talk to the guy with that funny camera. It's a lot of projection of myself onto other things. Boys tethered, being 15. The metaphor of like the gift of fog, which is the perfect metaphor for being 15, like how your body and your everything is shifting so fast. So it was a gift in this grim kind of primary color palette. Still with sticks. Not giving the dogs the sticks, just being like a weird kid. Oops, sorry, wait, I gotta go back. He was so cute. But it's really about rust, the color rust. It's just a bronzy photograph. Queerness, so I made this in Wellfleet years ago. That's me in the water and my then boyfriend and thinking about us in between, like the ephemeral time, eternal time. It's called Rising. It was my attempt was to make a visual haiku. It was supposed to be 7 panels, and it didn't work. But 4 of the like this happened, and it was perfect. This is Provincetown. This house no longer. There's actually a street now. It's near Pleasant Street. It was a little street off of Pleasant Street, and now they got rid of it. There's a man at the window, and there's a man down the road. Barcelona, the lucky coin. I'm picking up a coin on the street. So this is just called Kiss. The idea that you come to this open door. This is at a guest house in Provincetown in the mid-90s. I forget which one it was, but that depending on your take, you come to this door and it's like on the left and right that's in sharp focus is terry cloth and crystal doorknobs and wet shower curtains and all this kind of tactility. And through the door, different focus, you have a couple on a bed. Not just about sex, but it's also about emotion and love. And so you either look away or you keep looking through the door was my idea. This is for Bear Week. Go Fort Lauderdale. So this is called Black Sheep. They're putting on their socks. I did a residency at 20 Summers here in Provincetown. I put a call out in the, so I made portraits for a week. And so, not all men, but a lot of the really beautiful portraits of people in town. Barcelona. I'm picking up the pace. Connecticut. It's called Day Books. Just being with another man, you know, just reading till you fall asleep by the fire. Very romantic. You know, when I was in graduate school, I was like, oh my God, you know, if I made pictures, you know, I did have trouble making some of the work that I wanted to make because I was accused of perpetuating stereotypes of queer men. But my classmates, my hetero classmates, they were all on beds, and you know, I just felt it was a double standard. So there was tension. They loved the dad work, but like the work about my you know, gender identity and sexuality was not always easy. But you do it. And this is a body of work made here in Provincetown in 2011, 2012. At what used to be the Bryant House. It's next to Angel Foods. So this is this man, George Bryant, and his son. The house was being foreclosed upon due to back taxes and other issues. And George was a hoarder, and there was, you know, it also entailed some mental illness, and it was a lot. And so so I won't go on. I'll just show the pictures, but it's about George and Eric, one of his sons. I just photographed with them. I just spent time with them. That's Eric, the son. And I love this body of work. I'm not going to do it justice right now, but it was, you know, very meaningful. And now Ken Folk, some of you might know, he's an interior designer. He lives in this house now. He brought it back to what he felt it should be. So it's a lyrical documentary project of sorts. So I've made a lot of work in Provincetown over the years. That's George and Eric. George Bryant. Sadly, he passed. This is a bit of an outlier. It's Eric at a dune shack. He was talking about making decisions. He couldn't decide what to do, and so it's, you know, he says, I can't even decide what piece of fucking fruit to eat. And so that gave me this idea to make like this picture of him eating his way through a problem. But it's, you know, it was an excuse to make, you know, some pictures in, you know, nice light. So there are stories for each of these pictures, titling, and so Eric, called Ebb. More hoarding. The last picture I made of George before he passed away. That was the bike he would drive around with. He always had a basket full of things he got from what's the thrift store on Shank Painter? Yeah, the Methodist Church. And then a year after he died, I got a call from somebody that they found his bike. And they knew of this project, and wouldn't you know, he had two of them, you know, which made sense, right? That he would have two of the same bikes. So I made a picture before they cut them off the fence and disposed of them. And so that's how the picture looks in install, the works look in install. I'm just going to show this super fast. It's a project I made at the Mary Heaton Vorse House. So I made in 2023, 2024. Based on the life of Mary Heaton Vorse. Some of you know this story. She was a journalist, a freedom fighter, a novelist, an activist, and she fought for women's suffrage, equal rights especially for immigrant workers. She created a lot of change at a time that, you know, she was way ahead of her time. It's a fascinating story. Her life, she had an amazing life. So this is an actress, Gail Strickland, this is her performing Mary Heaton Vorse for me. And so it's a series of pictures I made over a summer where people came, and I photographed communities that, mostly women, that she helped give voice to, was my idea. And they were collaborative. This is Ingrid from the, she runs the front of the house at the Stop and Shop. Different wig every day. Amazing. Super. And that's my timer. Hold on. It's a non-binary fluid pile of women with one of their mothers. So this is the child of one of my best friends, Anthony. And so it was amazing, room by room, visitor after visitor, people that I knew, people that I didn't know. You can't see this, it's too bad. It's Amy Arbus, it's a very dark picture of her. It's called Amy Awake. She was having trouble sleep, but she couldn't sleep. Caroline, Anthony's sister. I'm going to go super fast because I want to wrap it up with the last little run of pictures. Sorry, I'm going just a couple minutes over. Called Forever Whatever. So looking at performers. Mary Heaton Vorse again. Okay, I'm going to go out with these last pictures of my father. I'll just say the last photographs I'm going to show you is my father kind of aging out. You know, he started to get older. My dad and I were very close. It's very sad. So he ages, eventually goes into a nursing home after a cardiac event, which became, rehab, which became a nursing home after that. And he lost his memory, just like my mother is now. So, I'll go right up to that part. So, is it okay? I'm sorry, I'm going to go just a couple minutes long. Doing exactly what I said I wouldn't do, but here I go, sorry. So, you know, we found his writings that he had, you know, we didn't know that he was trying to not lose his memory, so these were all like memory triggers that he had hidden in the jacket pocket, crib notes. He had beautiful handwriting. And then he went into the nursing home. He never wanted to go into one. He was trying to escape before he lost his memory. So that's called furniture walker, which is when you throw yourself. It's a clinical term for not wanting to use a cane or a walker, like you just use furniture. He became Mardi Gras King eventually. And this is his memory. You can see that he vacates his mind. There is a book of this work in the beginnings now. My father, the atheist, in the end asked for rosary beads. He was raised Catholic as a boy, so he's, you know, hedging his bets. So this is the last picture I took of my father. I didn't know it was to be the last one. It's called Another Bite. It's his old dentures and his new dentures. You can't see you can't see these slides. But then COVID happened, and he was gone. He was gone like almost immediately with 19 other people at the home. And it was a kind of a dark blessing because he had dementia for years, and so he would have wanted to go, but it was still heavy. And so the last pictures I'll show you, you couldn't bury bodies. You know, you had to be cremated. You couldn't gather for funerals. So for 2 years, I had him in a box, which is not what he wanted. So I found a box that looked like a casket, and I was living with him in my living room, and then I couldn't stand it anymore, and so I took him to all of the favorite places that we had. And so I did a series of pictures of his last hurrah before we buried him. So that's these last few pictures. These are all places that he loved. And it's like grief art. I was grieving. And it was a heavy box. I was like, he was still a pain in the ass. Like I'm dragging him around, and it was like being with him. And I'd often be with friends, sometimes with my brother. But it was really healing. It's his favorite breakfast. It took a lot to get the waitress to look away. I had somebody distract them, so then I put it up there really quick and made that. There's just a couple more pictures. Father's Day, 3 generations of fathers. This is the Concord River in Lowell. So it's like Lowell and the transcendentalists kind of colliding. This says fuck Trump, just telling you this. And these are the last ones. I think this is the last picture. And then he was buried. I've never photographed his grave itself. It just like, I don't feel like I need to go to his grave that much. I don't like going there. And that's it. Thank you. Sorry I went over. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That was such a gorgeous presentation. I think we're all okay with the fact that you went over. Yeah, let's get a round of applause for all our presenters tonight. Woo! So now we're going to invite everyone back to the stage for an audience Q&A. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to wait for Miracle to bring around a mic before asking your question. We are live streaming the event, so we just want to make sure that those watching at home can hear your questions. So if you guys all want to come back to the stage and turn your mics on, and there's some seltzers for you.
We have our first question. So I had a couple of questions that came from it, but it was just so amazing. What I wanted, and I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but it's setting up in places like Walmart and the grocery store, and I assume you had your big equipment. Were they accommodating to you?
Absolutely.
In that, and let you go ahead and do that? Yeah. And then I also, that man that, I don't remember, I don't know if you ever gave him a name for us, you know, that it's looking at you kind of seductively. When you have your models, do you tell them what you want them to do, or do you just wait for them to do it?
First thing is both the supermarket and the Walmart. It's amazing if you just ask what people do and if you explain something. It takes way more energy trying to get away with something than just like coming clean. Well, that's what I found. And so my mother they knew my mother at that Walmart. So she explained, they said, just don't get in people's way, because it is quite a setup. In the supermarket, I had to do it after hours. So they were accommodating. And the man I didn't know, he was a stranger at a country fair in Connecticut. I did learn that he was a volunteer firefighter and going off to Iraq. It was 2004. So I sent him a picture. I had his address. I never heard back from him. So I hope I don't know if he, no, I had him just look at the camera. But then he saw that I moved the camera and like looked at the Hulk, and he made the association that I was maybe making an association. And his friends started to laugh. So it kind of killed it. So I only got a couple of shots of him before. He didn't like that he felt a little bit like I was playing with him a little. He wasn't mad, but he felt uncomfortable after that. So, but if I had told him that, he never would have done it. Anyway, thank you.
Santee, it was such a wonderful experience to hear your work for the first time. And I guess there's just such a, like, you said you wrote some of that work over periods of like 5 years. And so I guess I'm wondering just a little bit about your process, like your writing process in general. I know that's super open, but there's such a presence and attention to the words and like a slowness. And I was really interested in how you achieved that in a process way over a long period of time.
When I was writing, I didn't know that I was writing that poem over 5 years. I thought that they were separate poems. But I had sort of a method. When the train would leave Chicago, I would write 3 lines at each stop. And then I would finish the poem, right, at each stop on the return. So the poems were like 6 lines or so. And at first it was just that process. I was just forcing myself to write. But what I noticed was whenever I was doing that work, and I was doing this like in the sleeper car, so I had my own space. But what I noticed was as I was writing in between stops, there was this sort of meditation that would happen, and I started noticing things a little bit more acutely as I was going through. And sometimes when you would be on the train, right, you could see people having dinner in their homes. One time in the middle of the night I saw a fight, like it was like high schoolers somewhere, and all these interesting things sort of popping up. And so I did that over a period of about 5 years, and I thought that those were separate poems. And then eventually they all started to it started to feel like the same poem or a longer poem. So to speak, and so in going on the train and going through, a lot of those images, the sunsets and all of those things, right, are from that sort of in between, right, sort of moments between the stops usually, and so, and I think partly it's the slowness and all of those things is because I did let the poem gestate. Right, and become its own thing. I didn't try to over-control it, I think is the part of it. And so that book is sort of a process book in that way. I came up with the idea of a world without Indigenous culture on the train, right? Because there were on that trail, there's very little references to Indigenous or Native peoples, except for maybe like in billboards and ads for like trading posts and things like that. And so that's how that sort of constraint in the book sort of popped up. Yeah, that was a good question, yeah.
Hi, I feel really grateful to have experienced all of your work because I haven't really looked into it in the past. I saw the movie Boy Erased because it had Troye Sivan involved in it. But I really enjoyed all of that. I have kind of a big question that I think I want to hear from each of you because I think it's also really great that we have 3 people that all are in different genres. And so I want to ask something to hear kind of the different takes on it. It's about language, and I think that language does show up in images too. And David, I want to say that at the beginning you said that you felt a little bit kind of bad that you wouldn't be able to speak as beautifully, but some of the things that you said, I wrote down more quotes from you than I did when I was listening because there was so many interesting things that you said. Nebulous gender, Jesus in the guest room. He never would have looked at me like that if not for the camera. Just so many standout lines just from you speaking regularly. What I wanted to ask of each of you is, it's on again. It kind of just faded out, but yeah, I just want to ask each of you how you interact with syntax and like sounds and calling back to images in your different forms, and maybe how revision comes into that. Like what steps do you take? How do you approach that?
Go real quick, sorry. In our class, we've been talking a lot about echoes and rhyming through an image system. And when I say image system, I mean sort of a sensory system that returns. So an example of that would be, if you're constructing a memoiristic reconstruction of a scene, you might have your mother in it who is throwing something away in the trash can. And if the trash can is stainless steel with one of those little pedals, and the creaking of the lid might be something that I include, then what does that rhyme with in the rest of my memory? And what I mean by that is it the stainless steel of my mother cutting something on a cutting board with the knife? Is it the light from the window that's harsh that reminds me of the creaking sound? That's on a micro level, and I think when you do that kind of tight texture, it's just really fun, and poets know how to do this really well, and it was definitely present in your poetry. And I actually just have to say that the way that you do your hand like that is exactly, I do this thing called stringing, where I do this while I write. When I was in David Sedaris's reading, he said he used to rock and so I think that's all part of the process as well. But yeah, so that's the micro level, and then on the macro level, I think there are subtle ways to do that throughout. If it's a long piece of fiction, for example, or book-length work, the startling image of this hung elephant that's in the beginning of my piece, which is meant to evoke all sorts of violence in the South towards all sorts of people. And this is sort of the way that this white televangelist has begun to sort of recognize there might be something really violent here. That echoes throughout the whole book in different ways, in subtle ways, because it's close third person. So we're in her head, and that's very oppressive sometimes. So I had to find a way to sort of puncture that very sort of monotone obsession that she has with these sort of images and sounds and stuff, if that makes sense. So by the end of the novel, you don't have to remind anybody about Mary, but you can you can use certain diction that will recall that, and it will make it feel more unified.
So,
yeah.
My first collection of poems, Dark 30, was sort of more what I call an accident, where I was really young, and so I felt like these were I would be inspired to write, and I would and I would be compelled and obsessed, and I would obsess over poems, right? For days sometimes, really trying to document, right, what I felt like was my autobiographical story. And I felt like there are all of these narrative conventions and things like that I learned as a way of, navigating that, who I am, but then also reconciling my past. And so I don't think that I was much attuned to language as much as I was technique, right? Narrative techniques, I think, in the poems. And so after I finished that, I tried to, when moving into the second, and trying to slowly strip away all of the narrative from the work. So some of those poems, right, especially the middle part in Half-Life, right, in the train, they would have sort of those narrative elements, and I would start getting upset with myself on the train in my little sleeper car that I was worried that I was writing the same poem over and over and over again. And I kind of lived in that fear for a couple of years, maybe a little bit. Maybe I still have that fear. I think I do. And so in doing that, there are different rhythms and sound structures, sonic structures, right, that emerge from removing that, right? And it's almost like some sections are unmusical, right? And I had to sort of shift my ideas as to what I thought was, change my perspective on what I thought was writing, the act of writing poetry, and then also aesthetics, so on and so forth. And eventually, I listened to a lot of accordion music, and so I did a lot of research on the accordion. None of that language makes it into the poem, but it works in the form, so the language spreads apart, and also the music breaks in certain ways, right? And thinking about that. Now I'm kind of working toward, I guess, like sort of deconstructing the language of anthropology. So the poems sound way more academic and conceptual now, mainly because of that language has such a power over indigenous existence, so on and so forth. And so I think I'm finally kind of in a place where I'm actually doing the language work that you're talking about.
Yeah. Is this, yeah, okay, hi. I've been sitting here thinking about how to interpret that question, and but I'm not gonna overthink it. But as far as like visual language, I think that because I love titling, and I talk to the students about titling a lot, that it doesn't have to dumb down a picture. It can add complexity. It can add more enigmatic. I think a lot of students are afraid to name something in art, like the titling. So I think I try to balance in my work within photographs the suggestion of a narrative, like look at this, look at this, look at this. And you can make association, but I like them to be suggestions. I never like the association to be kind of completely nailed down. And I like that in a title as well. Like I like that pictures can be open, although they can be so literal. It's like, but if you take it at face value, you might be wrong. And so I also like a title that is also equally kind of open. Like a picture that I didn't show today of my grandmother. It's called "For Her That Was a Smile." And you know, it sounds stupid and a little romantic, but it makes you think about her. Like, is that a smile? Like, what? It's like the title just makes you think more deeply about that. And I listened to people. I was photographing somebody when I was doing photographing at the 20 Summers, and I was taking a long time apparently. And I kept saying, "One more, one more." And he said something like, "Hurry up before all of my good faces are gone." And I said, "Damn, did you just not name that photograph for me?" So I also love that language can come from the interaction. And he was like looking at the camera, so he just was trying to give me what I wanted, but he was like running out of versions of himself. So, I mean, I don't know if that's really the answer to your question, but I really do like that, and I like the balance between a title and what's in the picture. And then conversely, I'll just end with this. I also like a picture that's just completely named by, like, the Hulk. It's just called Hulk. So I'm not going to add anything to that. They're both kind of hulky. And so it also becomes tedious when every title has to be somehow flowery. And so I think there's times to be direct and there's times to be a little slippery. And so I think about that a lot.
All right, I think we could have time for one more question. Or if no one has one, we can wrap up. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing? Tomorrow I'm bringing prints to my class up there. So if you are here, I will have actual real photographs because you couldn't really see the pictures, and that was disappointing for me. So if you want to come by and look at actual photographs, we'd love to have you stop by. Anyway.
Definitely come by. Thank you, everyone. Let's have another round of applause for our presenters. And all three presenters will actually have books they will sign in the back if you want to come to that table, and you can purchase a book at the back right there. And we're excited to see you all for student night tomorrow night.